Excellent. Thank you very much. A lot to unpack there. So many great things that we can take forward out of today. I think the big thing that jumped out at me about your whole scenario, I mean, the irony of the day's event is framing a pathway forward. But I almost see the word reframing a pathway forward almost being sort of the correct statement. I mean, you talked about less about focusing on the incident and more about focusing on the outcome.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about what triggered the trauma. It's about the trauma.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. And that's something that's come out with just what everybody we've talked about today is the outcome.
I think the greatest quality that I have is I have trauma. That's one of my greatest qualities is I have trauma.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not.
It actually pushed me to where I am today. Right? And everybody looks at it as so negative and such a burden and all this, but like the last 13 years of my life, last 15 years of my life I've been sober, have been like the greatest learning experiences of my whole entire existence on this planet, you know? And, you know, I just made a choice, made a decision that I was gonna, you know, because why am I in this field? Because I'm trying to heal myself. That's the only reason why I'm here. You know? Yeah, ultimately I like helping people or whatever, but I'm on my own journey. I'm trying to figure this out for myself.
It's interesting. I refer to something often in the coaching world called the coach's mirror, and that is you'd be amazed how many, and not you would obviously experience this, but from an outside perspective, the amount of times that a coach actually absorbs more from the relationship than the player in that situation. It's the coach's mirror. The reality is the learning is happening on the opposite side of the coin every bit as much, and if it's growing both ways. So you're having this opportunity to be a coach to these people. I want to walk through a couple of things. You know, the one that really jumped out at me as well was letting go. My wife always says that, Trev, everything you've ever let go of in your life had claw marks in it. And that's absolutely the truth. And I mean, right up to the end of your session today, you talked about, you know, forgiveness, letting go of the forgiveness. Take me through the process of letting go. I mean, it's not something that it happens in an instant, but it doesn't happen in an instant, if that makes sense. How did that get there?
Well, I think, you know, the night before I got sober was, you know, really when that happened for the first time, where I just said, you know what, I can't run this ship anymore. And I'm trusting. Well, it kind of went back and forth, right? Because I said, you know, I used the word God that night, but I said, you know, God, I realize you only give people as much as they can handle. I said, I'm full. Like, I'm full. You can't put one more thing on my plate. But I said, if you take away the obsession to drink and do drugs and gamble and all these things, I said, I'll make a promise to you that I'll let go of the steering wheel and you drive the bus the rest of the way. And, you know, the next morning I woke up and I haven't had a drink or a drug since that day. But what's really happened is all this amazing stuff. Like, I got to tell my story. I got to work with people. I got, you know, so many amazing things have happened since I've given up control, because I'm in control of nothing, you know? And, you know, I do this really cool therapy process called EMDR therapy. And it is one of the most effective kind of therapies for post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was doing a session with my therapist, and it's kind of like, it's almost hypnotic. Okay, so you get into this really cool, awesome state. And somehow we ended up going right back to before I was conceived, like 5 days before I was conceived. So it was just me and the Creator. And what he said in that conversation was, everything that's happened in your life is exactly the way I planned it. That you're going to struggle, you're going to go through all these things. And I was just like, wow, you know? And he said, but the reason why I did these things is because I knew that you would be somebody who would go out and teach and share your story and all these things. And it was such a profound day in my life. And it was like, it was confirmation that, you know, that when I did surrender, that all these things were going to fall into place, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's why I love therapy, because there's so many amazing things that can happen if you go in with the right attitude. Like, if you go into a therapeutic environment and you say, oh, this is hokey pokey and this isn't going to work, well, guess what? It's not, right? Okay. And if you go in with a great attitude saying, you know what, I'm going to get something out of this, you'll get something out of it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like with relationships too. It's the same thing. If it's all one-sided and a one-way street where there's no give and take, that relationship's not going to last very long, right? So, and ultimately, that's what therapy is all about. Having a relationship with myself, you know, getting rid of, you know, putting the big pile of crap in the middle of the table, taking a look at it and saying, okay, that's the past, and I want to move forward, right? And they say, if you think about the past, that's depression. If you think about the future, that's anxiety. So where are we at? We're living in a high state of anxiety because we don't know what the future looks like. And so now we're seeing this huge problem with people who are having struggles with their mental health. Well, because we're all living in high states of anxiety, you know, which is cortisol, adrenaline, you know, all of these crazy chemicals. Like cortisol is like acid in your body. Right? And where does disease love to live? In an acidic body, right? Yep. So if we don't do meditation and yoga and, you know, exercising, and like sleep is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. If you don't sleep, like your brain can't repair itself. The only time the brain repairs itself is when we're sleeping. Gets rid of all the junk. And so if you're sleeping like 3-4 hours, which a lot of people are right now, yeah, you're gonna have some challenges. You're gonna have some issues. So sleep is incredibly important.
And that came up in a conversation earlier today. Was the power of sleep in that situation? And to those on the outside, it seems like such a simplistic answer. But honestly, the depth of that answer is huge, right? It really is such a big piece, is to take care of those little details and to trust the outcome, right? I mean, we're sort of like bakers. If you watch someone bake bread and you looked at every ingredient that went into that bowl, some of it you would be shocked that is actually in that outcome. Like, no one's going to take a mouthful of salt and think it's tasty, but it doesn't taste bad in banana bread. Like, and we have to trust that what's going to come out of the oven at the end of the day, and all of those ingredients going in that bowl is our lives. And some of the experiences are a little slimy, some are a little greasy, some are salty, some are bland, some are dry. But we just got to trust the outcome that's going to come out at the end is there.
Absolutely.
Right?
And nobody's going to go through this world, this life, unscathed.
No.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Because we need these examples or challenges or traumas or whatever you want to call it. We need them in order to grow as people. Like, we need challenges. We need adversity, right?
Yeah.
Because adversity creates what? Resilience, right? And I find, especially early on in my life, like I faced a lot of adversity, but it built this incredible resilience inside of me. And so that resilience has carried me through the most difficult times in my life when I needed it, right?
Yep.
And so that's why I say all the adverse things that happened in my life were absolute gifts. Because without that experience, I wouldn't have resilience. I'd be cowered in a corner, like not being able to function if I didn't have resilience. And so part of life is having some adversity in front of you, which then creates resiliency. And then once you have that resiliency, there's nothing you can't accomplish.
I want to take you into that. The first thing that jumps to my mind is your reference to golf. And, you know, beginning of the year, everybody gets out, or when they first start taking the game and they go hit balls, what happens to their hands? They get blisters.
Yeah.
But the only way to not get blisters is to get blisters, because you develop calluses. You develop coping mechanisms. Your body will understand how to handle and manage the adversity. We need to put ourselves in the adverse situation. And that's the scenarios. It's almost developing calluses on our psyche, right? Or
Absolutely.
on our emotional state.
For sure.
And understanding ways that we can cope through
Well, we need examples that we can get through stuff.
Yeah.
Right? But like I said, you know, it's like, you know, when we won the Stanley Cup in 1989, some reporter came to me and said, so how does it feel like the first time in your life winning? I'm like, what are you talking about? I go, I learned about winning when I was 6 years old playing in Russell, Manitoba. I got the blueprint when I was 6 years old. And once you have the blueprint for success, you have it for the rest of your life, you know?
Yeah.
And when it came to my recovery, when it came to recovering from my trauma and all that, I already had the blueprint. It was hard work, it was honesty, it was openness, and it was willingness. That was it, you know? Mm-hmm. And we've sort of created this stigma in society where I can't talk about my truth. Well, if I can't talk about my truth, then where can I? Mm-hmm. Because if I don't get it out, guess what happens? It gets stored in my body. Yeah. And when it gets stored in my body, then I'm in big trouble. Because that's where disease, that's where, you know, all that stuff, it all lives. And if I don't, because trauma gets stored in your body. And if you don't move the trauma out of your body, it's going to cause you all kinds of, you know, other problems.
It's gonna get you eventually.
Yeah.
It's gonna get you eventually.
Yeah.
There's an old saying, and I can't even tell you who to attribute to, and I may butcher the statement in general, but it's the idea that let's quit rescuing people from the stream and walk upstream and find out why they're jumping in the first place.
Yeah.
Like we're wasting our energy over here when the reality is it's way up there. And we can't stop the rain in their life. You talk about holding a place for people and their story and creating a safe place to share. We can't stop the rain in their life, but we can sure share our umbrella. And that's what we need to do.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is in our mental health campaigns is get rid of the 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 stat. Get rid of it. Because that only adds to the stigma. We're shaming the one person who has mental illness, and we're saying to the other 4 people that they're okay. Yeah. Right? It's 5 and 5. It's all of us. And if we're going to tackle the biggest problem on the planet, it's going to take all of us. Right? Mm-hmm. Not just a certain few of us. It's going to take all of us. But I guarantee you, if we do take this on, all of us, holy shit, is the world going to be amazing? Mm-hmm. If we all come together and live our lives with compassion and empathy, and we can listen to these stories and help people move forward, like, it'll be unbelievable if we can get to that place. But the stigma is, I can't tell my story. I can't talk about how many times I was raped. I can't talk about my parents, you know? Well, that's part of my experience. And if I can't talk about it openly, then here we are. Here we are. This is the result of tough love, sucking it up for what, 100 years now? This is the result. Yeah. Everybody's nervous systems are completely off kilter, out of whack. And how do you get back there? Well, you got to have spiritual practice. You got to practice, you know, something greater than yourself. You got to hand it over, right? Mm-hmm. Like the stuff that God gave me early on in my life, I give back to him. I said, I don't need this anymore. You can have it back. It doesn't serve me a purpose, you know? And I never knew that I could do those kind of things, right? Because it's my God, not the one that I grew up in, right? Because I went to Catholic church, and my mom was Jehovah's Witness. And so, you know, this concept of I get to pick my own God was like, wow, okay, I get it. You know, what works for me, not what works for you. I need what works for me, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of Buddhism in my beliefs. There's a lot of Catholicism in it. There's some Jehovah in there. There's some indigenous stuff. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that I've used that is now my own. It's become my belief in something greater than myself. And, you know, the world is in a lot of chaos. Well, they're trying to remove God out of the equation. And when you remove God out of the equation, what happens? Chaos and craziness and insanity. because we're worshiping false gods.
I love the word belief in that scenario, because belief and hope kind of are married, right? I mean, if you have something to believe in, you can be hopeful that things will manifest in the way you want. And that's just such a big piece, is to have something to be hopeful about. And that's where this event today, you know, it's a forum for people to share stories. And for some people, when we share our story, it might just be the first draft. I mean, this might be crumpled up and thrown in the garbage. You're going to get better at telling the story.
Absolutely.
We were taught that in school. Write multiple drafts. But write the first draft. Like, get it out there. I listened to an author one time talk, and he was talking about finding a mentor to write a book, and he confessed to his mentor, he's like, I'm so scared I want the book to be perfect. He says, oh, don't worry about it. It won't be. But it'll get better. First draft. And we need to create this situation where people are willing to tell their story and not be good at it, but just tell the story. And it's amazing how the conversations you have add to your story, because you can relate or resonate with other people in their stories. We're going to pull up a couple of comments on the screen, I think, if we can, in a second here.
Well, that's why I called my story The Power of Me Too, because, you know, someday you're going to get to that place of courage, and you're going to be sitting around in a room with a bunch of people, and you're going to tell your story, and you know what's going to happen? That person across the table is going to go, you know what? That happened to you? That happened to me too, right? And now you've made that connection.
Every movie that I've ever been moved by, or every comedy or everything, I can place myself in a character. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's all those are, is stories. I mean, music is just a story with a beat. Like, it's a story, and you're trying to find ways to have other people be placed so they can find themselves in your story. We got a viewer interaction here. Just want to say thank you for saving my life, Theron. I reached out to you, and you helped me. You told me it was time to heal. I was discharged from Clare's Home Center for Mental Health and Addictions yesterday, and was finally able to hold my wife and kids. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Applause, right? Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is exactly what it's about. And I'm guessing, tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it's one of those, you hear that, not only did they hear you and your story, you maybe heard yourself and theirs. Like, that's the coaching mirror, right? It really goes both ways. And the better you are at sharing your story, the more incredible stories you have. So we'll watch for a couple more comments.
Well, and that's what I always tell young coaches, is your job is to learn more from the kids you're coaching than you can teach them. And you should see some of the looks I get when I make that statement, because ego, right? And, you know, we got to take the ego out of this, right? And we need to come together, right? Because there's what, 10,000 mental health groups across Canada? And how many people actually talk and share information, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating when you put the whole scenario together and you look at it and you hear all these people tell their stories and you see all of the different avenues. I love when you talked about tools. And the reality is, if I were to put an electrician's toolbox on this table and a plumber's toolbox on this table, we open them up, they would look dramatically different. But they are both powerful toolboxes for those people and for what they are facing for their daily jobs, occupations, lives, and careers. So just because your toolbox doesn't look like someone else's doesn't mean it's not important.
Exactly.
We got another viewer interaction. Theo, I'd love to know more about Indigenous ceremonies and how it has impacted your healing. I'm just so curious about it all. Thank you for sharing your story of hope. Before I turn this one to you, I want to mention something that jumped out to me, and it's one of those, nobody tells better stories than Indigenous people. That's how they communicate message. It's how they merge the meaning and the message, and they've done it that way, and there's so much power in there. So I'll let you take that comment.
Wow. I think it's the greatest untapped resource of medicine for this kind of healing on the planet. Nobody does spirituality better than the Indigenous community, I'm telling you. I've been everywhere in the world. I've traveled all over the world. I've been to the Vatican. I was at the Kremlin in Moscow. Like, I've been everywhere. And, you know, it just makes sense because it's simple. It's very simple. It's like Mother Earth. Take care of Mother Earth. Take care of Mother Earth. She's going to take care of you, right? You know? And, you know, I sweat with a very powerful medicine man out of Cardston, Alberta. His name's Arnold Mountain Horse. And what he tells me is, he says, every single disease on the planet, there's a plant for that disease that'll cure it, right? And, you know, like, yeah, there are certain types of mental illness that need big pharma's help, but I would say for general mental health stuff, I've taken a real, very holistic approach to my healing, and you know, something as simple as sitting and taking 5 deep breaths is better than any other, you know, drink of alcohol or whatever. But like the one thing that attracted me to the indigenous spirituality was the elders, the spiritual healers, and the medicine men. And what I was attracted to was their serenity. I was like, oh my God, like, you're so calm. And the way you speak, and I was like, I want that. I want to be like you, because I lived in chaos and violence and craziness my whole entire life, and I never experienced what real serenity was until, you know, I'd go and sit in a sweat lodge with all these, you know, pipe carriers and all these people, and these guys were just like the most mellow dudes and just awesome people. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want to be. That's what I want to aspire to be, is that, have that much serenity. And like, chaos is happening around them all everywhere, and they're just like, woo-saw. You know, they're just...
It's funny you say we talk about, and this sort of goes back to, I look at you being a professional athlete, and you know, there's a lot of a struggle in celebrity worlds of any form, where you slowly become loved and adored and revered for what you do, and the world forgets who you are. And then you eventually begin to forget who you are too, until you retire from sport, or until what you do is taken away from you, and you're left with just who you are. And it's so much of those scenarios where we go through life with a to-do list, and we forget to have a to-be list. Because the to-be list will be the common thread that rolls through everything we do. So when we ebb and flow, retire in, out, and we go through those challenges, it's just such a fascinating thing. So, and you're right, the serenity is such a big piece, right? To see the chaos amongst that storm.
And the amazing thing was that, you know, even though, you know, I would describe my childhood as difficult, I grew up in an incredible community of people, okay? And they instilled some incredible morals in me that I still, you know, have as a core of who I am. And, you know, when, you know, it was interesting because, you know, the whole entire Stanley Cup roster in 1989, the combined payroll of that team was $7 million, okay? When I went to New York, I made $8 million in 1 year, okay? So as the money got bigger, and I didn't have money as a kid, I completely lost who I was. Completely lost who I was. And part of the struggle during that last part of my career was because I lost myself. You know, I was getting bombarded from every direction, like it was crazy. And you know what's interesting? My phone doesn't ring anymore. Why? Because I don't have money. And I love it. It's the best thing ever, you know? And the people that call me are actually people that care about me, and you know. And I have one more great story. So people said, you know, you want to find out who your real friends are, get sober. Okay, so I get sober. I have 500 phone numbers in my iPhone. Okay? So I said, I'm going to try this, see who all my friends are, right? So I called all 500 numbers. And I said, listen, made a choice, made a decision. I'm not drinking, not going to the bars, so don't ask me to do that. I said, but if you'd like to come to my house, I'll cook you a nice dinner. First time in our relationship, we'll actually have a meaningful conversation. You know how many friends I had left? 2. 2 of 500. But you know what? That's all I needed. Because my 2 friends wanted to see me sober and all that. But what's really interesting is the 498, who I call my 10 o'clock friends, because you know what happens at 10 o'clock? I love you, man. You know, everybody gets all drunk and, you know, the truth serum comes out. What's interesting is the law of attraction, not promotion. So I went out, went on my journey, got some healing, you know, started feeling better. And the 498 would see me out and they'd go, man, do you ever look good? Like, what are you doing? I got sober. And then you'd hear that. Yeah, you know what? I've been drinking way too much and I've been partying a lot. And so now they're invited in the conversation. So I say, here's my new number. When you're ready, I can help you look like this if you want, you know? And so it's kind of cool to, you know, to have been through all these different, you know, scenarios and stuff. So.
It's sort of the serenity of the Sweat Lodge coming full circle.
Yeah.
People are now seeing the serenity. They're like, that looks fun.
Yeah.
That looks peaceful.
Well, because they saw me as this hyper crazy party crazy guy, and all of a sudden they like, you're calm, you know, like what happened, you know?
Yep, it's been absolutely awesome to have you here today, and I have no doubt the people that have been watching at home, like I said, there was just so much to unpack. We literally could shelve the rest of the agenda and continue to talk. There is enough coffee in house to do that if we needed to.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, I mean, you stepped forward. You helped frame a path forward. You talked vulnerability, sharing your story, creating a safe space. All of these things, and we can't thank you enough for being a part of that conversation today, and for the work you do, not just today, but every day. And more importantly, the work you do for yourself, because that creates the strength.
Right.
We talked earlier, you got to be seaworthy before you can start rescuing people in the ocean, and that's the real work.
Yeah.
Once you get that, it's amazing how easy it is to help others.
Yeah.
Once you're seaworthy, right?
Yeah, because I don't live with expectations anymore. You know, I just do the next right thing, you know, whatever that is. And, but I, you know, for me to be able to listen to somebody and keep my mouth completely shut and closed is a miracle, you know? And ultimately, that's what I needed to learn, because that's all people want. Just listen to me. I don't need advice. I don't need some magic formula or whatever. I just need you to listen to me, because I would say 9 times out of 10, those people have never been listened to in their life, and nobody's ever been present or attuned. You know, like I grew up with a father who, you know, after work, went to the local pub, drank 40 draft, came home, sat in the big chair, and was completely comatose as we were wrecking the house, as him sitting there, you know? Obviously, I've been able to repair that relationship. I'm extremely proud of my dad. He's going to celebrate 36 years of sobriety next week. But, you know, that's the kind of environment I grew up in. And so, you know, no wonder I was this guy, because, you know, I always tell people, the only place that I felt comfortable was in chaos. So what happened when I stepped over the boards and played the game? As soon as I stepped on the ice, it was complete madness, chaos, craziness. And I created it because that's the only place I felt safe. And now, I don't need that anymore. I just want peace, joy, happiness, and serenity, which is hard to do. But ultimately, that's the goal for all of us, I think, especially those of us who struggle with mental health challenges, is you know, not like you're never going to experience it all the time, but when you experience it little bits and pieces along the way, that tells me that you're doing your work, right? Because the work is never done, but you're going to experience along the way, right? And so when you go into the next life, you don't have to work on this stuff.
In the athlete's term, it's the you can't play every game in the zone, but boy, the zone feels good when you've done the work to be there.
Absolutely.
And you're not sure how you've created it, but you didn't create it today. It's an outcome of what you did yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's just trying to live life in the zone, right?
Yep.
And athletes get it.
Yep.
The zone is a place to be. We have moments of our career or moments of our lives where we're in it. Things are bouncing off our shin pads in the net. We're scoring, not even trying. That's the reality. But it's not about that moment. It's an earned opportunity.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Well, and you know, it's about getting up every day and participating in your own life, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. Like, just participate in your own life, and go with honesty, openness, and willingness, right? And if you do that, the people that are judging you don't have the same courage that you do. That's how I see people who judge, is you don't have the courage. And because you don't have the courage, you need to point the finger at me because I'm actually doing the work that you need to do.
Yep.
Right? And so don't listen to the noise. Listen to your heart. Like, live in your heart chakra, because your heart never lies to you. This thing on top of your head, you know, it's lying to you all the time.
Yep.
And if you live in the heart space, that's where all that peace and joy and happiness, that's where it all lives, is in that spot, right? And you know, the thing about the brain is Velcro for negativity, because it's our survival mechanism. And they say it takes 500 positive thoughts to undo one negative thought. And so when we talk about living in the moment and being present, that means shutting this thing off with, you know, breathing techniques, meditation, yoga, you know, all of these things. Like, when I'm on the golf course, there's not one negative thing that's going on.
That's a rarity for all the golfers out there that have played the game. How do you play golf without a negative thought? But I get where you're going.
I'm not there to, you know, shoot 63. I'm there because it's the only place where I have peace, joy, happiness, and serenity. And to me, it doesn't matter what I shoot. It's just that happy place, right? And everybody has a happy place. So go find that happy place, whatever that is. Guys love to fish, you know? That's same thing.
Find the place where you can be that serene person you were looking at. Thank you. You have one more. You're good. And
find your tribe.
Yeah.
Find your tribe of people that that understand you. You know. And I'll just say one thing. So I started a private group where we meet twice a month online, and we will provide the link if people want to join our group, because it's an amazing group. It's called Trauma Transformation. So we talk about trauma, and we see people in real time going through courageous, amazing things. So
I love it, and there's the link on the screen right there. I'm going to make sure I get myself a copy of that. That looks like a great thing to take part in. Thank you so much for being here, Theron. It is absolutely a pleasure and an honor to talk with you, hear your stories, hear your wisdom, and hear your experience. And I love the way you've reframed things, and I love the way you've brought some energy today.
Well, I have a sister that actually lives in Medicine Hat. Did you know that?
Selena.
Yeah.
I knew this. I forgot this. Yes, I do.
I lived with her in Moose Jaw for 3 years, her sister, her mom, and Selena. And so, yeah, she's a pretty awesome person.
She is. I've seen her roaming the halls here today.
She's done a lot of amazing work in this city, and really, really proud of her.
A big part of this event, right, with her work with the Medicine District Food Bank and being a part of today.